Hi, it's Kirby. Today is September the 12th, and this is a patron-only podcast. This podcast is going to deal with information I received from a source. At the end of this podcast, I will name the source who told me how Jeffrey Epstein was murdered and also basically who murdered him. So I am aware that the debate of whether or not Jeffrey Epstein is dead or alive continues to present day. From where I sit, I see it more as a red herring, something to take your attention away from the broader picture. Because while I am aware, for example, that some intelligence operatives are indeed given a new identity, made to cut off all communication with their family and their friends, and they start a completely new life somewhere else, even after undergoing plastic surgery. I do not believe this is what happened to Jeffrey Epstein. What I believe happened is on the day before Epstein was murdered, so that would have been August 9th, 2019, a story by a mainstream journalist appeared on what was then called Twitter. And it read, and basically I'm paraphrasing. I know I did take a screen image, which I have somewhere, that Jeffrey Epstein had agreed to a plea deal that he was going to name 500. Now, I don't think we've heard even 500 names, right? Even from the books, the combined two books that we have, but that he was going to provide the names of 500 of the people, not just men, but people, which includes women, who shelled out money to have inappropriate relationships with the trafficked. Again, it wasn't specified whether it was just girls or boys as well. And I know from my research that there were some boys, some 19-year-old boys, and there were some younger girls. You don't forget the 3 12-year-old triplets who Jean-Luc Brunel gifted Jeffrey Epstein for his birthday. So don't forget about the fact that there were younger children involved as well. So that made news. I remember RTing it with some additional information. And then the next day, it was Saturday, I remember going out for coffee, getting a phone call from one of my friends who said, "You're not going to believe this," and then he told me what happened, and he's like, he committed suicide. I stopped what I was doing. I left my coffee. I ran back home to see what was going on. In the meanwhile, I went back to that tweet where it claimed Epstein was going to plea. He was going to give up the names of 500 people who, again, paid, meaning that there were people that were blackmailed, right? And then, he was running, basically, we can call it an escort service. People were paying. Maybe they were being filmed too, because we know that Leslie Wexner provided Epstein with a home fit to catch audio and video surveillance, and that in fact all of his homes and the island, as well as his cars, his planes, everything was retrofitted in that manner. However, that tweet with the information about the 500 names that he was going to give up disappeared, never to be seen again. What so I've had a lot of contact with a lot of people connected to intelligence who have reached out to me, commencing at the point in time, July 2019, when I began working on bringing what I knew together with what I was able to connect, because I had certain facts that were not being discussed by anyone, that I was then able to connect to other dots, and that's when I started on my road to where I am today. At which point there were a bunch of people who were formerly with one three-letter agency or another who reached out to me, some of whom I remained in touch with, some of whom then introduced me to other people. And, throughout the course of these years, I've met many people, either directly or indirectly involved with this story. So, I received a phone call from an operative whose name many of you will probably recognize. And he had been given my number by another operative. Again, at the end of this podcast, I will reveal the names of these two operatives. I received a phone call, and the only reason that I accepted the phone call was because he left a voicemail. And it sounded just like him. I knew what he sounded like. And he has an unusual name. And so I sat down for 5 minutes and I wondered whether I wanted to go down that rabbit hole. And I did. We were on the phone for a very long time. We talked about many things, but among the things that we talked about was the murder of Jeffrey Epstein. And the way he told it to me is that one of the sons of, and I'm going to just kind of leave it a little vague here, of either Carl Bernstein or Bob Woodward, both of whom worked at the Washington Post. And I think you guys know that the Washington Post had been a long-term CIA asset. In fact, let me just give you another piece of info. In 2013, Jeff Bezos purchased the Washington Post, and he paid $250 million. 4 months later, Amazon was awarded $600 million from CIA. It was a special contract for Amazon. So that, bottom line, the Washington Post, as with mainstream media in general, as all of you now are probably more aware, remains a mockingbird asset, right? We don't really get real news from the mainstream. We get propaganda. So he told me that the son of one of these two men contacted him relentlessly because somehow he knew that this former operative knew the answer as to what happened with Epstein. So he told me during the course of our very, very long conversation, where he described other operations that many people don't have the answer to, but thankfully I had some insight into what he was telling me, was that and you know that everything went wrong, right? The cameras were not working at the jail, at the Manhattan Correctional Center where Epstein was. The guards fell asleep. I mean, it was on and on and on and on. Everything went wrong, right? We know that Bill Barr made this statement that we're going to get to the bottom of this. Well, did that happen? No, it didn't happen. Okay, so my source tells me that a government official of one of the three-letter agencies, who is a professional silencer, that's a word I'm making up right now. I guess he's just a professional contract killer, whatever. They have them, was allowed into the jail. Now, I want you to know that the person in charge of the jails in the United States is the Attorney General. So it would be Bill Barr. And then above Bill Barr, you need to go to the president. And at the time, it was Donald Trump. All right. So Bill Barr would have had to have gotten permission from Donald Trump in order to then make the decision to allow someone at the Metropolitan Correctional Center to open the door to allow an operative in. Okay, once the operative, and in fact, there is film of it. My source told me it's on film. He saw the film. He knows what happened, and that is why the son of either Bernstein or Woodward reached out to him so many times, because he knew that there was a film, and he knew that my source had access to that film. Okay. So that what happened was this operative who went there with the sole intent of murdering Jeffrey Epstein was allowed into the jail. One of the guards and the operative went into Epstein's cell and killed him. And then they tried to stage it. And then, of course, the result is that we, the public, were told that it was suicide. Now, the name of my, the person who told me is Michael Reconnes. And the way I met Michael Reconnes, I'm sure you know who that is through Bill Hamilton, who I had a very long, lengthy, years-long back and forth communication regarding Promise, because Promise is connected to the Epstein story, not just Robert Maxwell and all of that, but I don't know, few people seem to go down that rabbit hole. However, according to Michael Reconnes, he finally told the son of either Bernstein or Woodward, and he was told by this man that he was going to write the story, and that's why he wanted the information, that he wanted to break this story. And Michael Reconnes, thinking that this would be a good thing, because of course, if you open up another portal into the secret world, it would be helpful. You know, he had become a whistleblower. And so he believes in opening up portals of information. Now, I want to say that while he appears in American Conspiracy about the Danny Castellero story, I personally find the documentary to be lacking on many levels. And then in the fourth part, as you know, if you've watched it, the investigators who are recreating Danny Castellero's moments, they sort of put both Bill Hamilton and Reconnes down. And I think it's the only way you could have gotten anything made on Netflix, is if you do not give in to the fact that Danny was murdered. Okay, so again, we go into what's allowed on a mainstream media platform like Netflix, where obviously these two had to either make it so that it didn't end with a definitive note. But I take objection because I know Bill Hamilton, and he's a very straight talking man, very honest man. And Michael Reconnes only went to jail because he stepped forward to help Bill Hamilton, providing him with an affidavit, and he's paid dearly. So I'm going to have to state that I take offense at anyone who tries to discredit either one of those two men. So the person, again, who killed Epstein was an operative by a 3-letter agency, together with one of the guards there, and it was murder. All right, well, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. Please give this a like. Talk soon. Bye.